They say less is more, but is that true for the bosses in Majora's Mask? Well, in today's video, I'll be discussing all 5 as I rank them from worst to best. For this list, I will be referencing the Nintendo 64 version, as the bosses here are much better than they are in the remake. It's also the most accessible via the Switch Online, and no, that's not a sponsored post, but it might be down the track if the channel grows. Anyway, enough of that nonsense, let's jump to it. I'll set the scene. It's the last main dungeon and you've defeated 2 of the best mini-bosses. You've also acquired an interesting mask which you're not yet able to use. You reach the end of the temple, fall into a giant hole, and your expectations are running high, only to be faced with this. Twinmold is the epitome of disappointment, a lackluster design with a boring, unintuitive fight. At first, these 2 insects look intimidating because they're so much bigger than you, but they just fly around minding their own business. When you wear the Giant's Mask and become Supersized Link, Twinmold feels like a hazard in the environment rather than a final boss. Both insects have 2 weak spots in their head and tail, which are easily hit by the sword when in giant form. Twinmold deals damage upon contact, but that only really happens when you misjudge your attacks, because they don't really come after you. This whole fight is insulting. It doesn't make you think, it doesn't test your combat skills, and it doesn't utilize your arsenal. It feels more like an early game mini-boss rather than the penultimate baddie. Twinmold really needed to put all of your puzzle solving and combat skills to the test like everything else in Stone Tower Temple, but it failed. If you've seen my previous videos, you'll know I like to find positives, especially in these lower ranked entries. For me, the best thing about this encounter is the setting. If I think really hard, it doesn't make sense given you should have fallen into the sky, but perhaps we can put that aside to enjoy this luscious sand dune. I think it's cool how you return to the start of the dungeon if you stray too far. Also, if you want a challenge, you can just use arrows to hit Twinmold's weak spot rather than becoming a giant. It's not the best, but it's something. As with the mini-boss ranking, I ran polls on Instagram, and to no surprise, this was voted worst boss on that list as well. You can check out the Insta placement at the bottom right corner of the screen and follow along at Hungry Heracross to have your say in future videos. After entering this boss room, the camera shifts to the perspective of an underwater creature looking towards Link. It creates a sense of dread that hypes up this battle before the gargantuan fish Georg is revealed. Unfortunately, that's probably the best part of this entry. Georg's official artwork is good, but I'm not a fan of its design in-game. To me, it feels like an edgier, uglier version of the anglerfish from Link's Awakening, which is not a great starting point. As the Great Bay Temple's final challenge, this fight utilizes the Zora Link form, but not to great effect. I think the game wanted you to use your boomerangs to stun Georg before swimming into it with the magical barrier. However, trying to hit this thing with orca projectiles is an absolute pain, so it's much easier to use arrows. Downside is though that you tediously change forms every few seconds. But unlike most battles in the game, Georg is no pushover. It will ram into the pillar and knock you into the water so that it can eat you. But this is more of an inconvenience than an actual threat, as being consumed by the fish looks boring and it doesn't hurt too much. Compared to the interaction with Gecko earlier in the dungeon, it's rather disappointing. As the fight progresses, Georg will release smaller fish into the arena, but they're hardly noticeable. Looking into the room overall, it's not too bad. It matches the dungeon aesthetic, and the idea of a central platform surrounded by murky water matches the occasion. I do love the little details of the seaweed in the water and the grounded lights, but it's a shame that the rest of the encounter was a letdown. This boss would have really benefited from a more effective use of the Zora form and a bit more grunt from the final boss. As it stands, you just want to get this fight over and done with so you can progress the interesting Zora subplot. Adolwa is a giant humanoid warrior that resides in Woodfall Temple. He dances, he chants, and he towers over Link. The sheer size and erratic movements of Adolwa make him incredibly menacing, especially for the first boss of the game. The jungle warrior will damage Link by jumping into him, swinging his sword, or calling down an onslaught of insects. The varied attacks keeps you guessing, and it's pretty rewarding to avoid them. The moths in particular are a tremendous sight that can feel overwhelming, especially in such a dark room with Adolwa prancing around. Thankfully this arena is quite large, so there's plenty of space to move and dodge. What this fight does particularly well is the many options you have to deal damage. You can opt for a classic sword fight, or you can stand back and fire some arrows. You can also use Deku-Link, or if you're brave, some high risk items like the blast mask or bombs. It's a lot of fun to trial different combinations, and it makes Adolwa one of the best fights to repeat. In terms of opening bosses, it's definitely up there as one of the best in the series, but it doesn't quite reach the heights of best in game. Definitely a step up from the first two though. The final boss of this game is a rather unique one, as it can be the hardest or the easiest fight if you use the Fierce Deity mask. The actual location of the boss room is ambiguous, but it looks stunning. It's full of colour with a haunting chill that fits perfectly with the battle against the various forms of Majora. The first of these forms is simply Majora's mask, but now it's got a mullet. Its only weakness is behind the mask, unless you're Fierce Deity Link, because then any hit does damage. I do like that we face the mask as it's been shown up until this point, and its attack pattern of spinning towards you makes a lot of sense. But I don't like these stringy additions, even if it does help connect this mask to later forms. The second phase sees Majora grow legs, arms and a head, turning into some manic being akin to a Wizrobe. It shoots cool projectiles, but it's nothing too special. Its best form is Majora's Wrath, the final phase that is an absolute fright to behold. With lone whip-like arms, a demonic looking face and a slender body, it's the stuff of nightmares. If this game wasn't scary enough, this creature will have you sleeping with the lights on for weeks. If you're not using the Fierce Deity mask, then this last challenge is extremely difficult. The whips are relentless, and Majora will punish you for the slightest misstep. It needs to be stunned before you can deal serious damage, but this creature does not give you much time to land the necessary attacks. It also uses Beyblades, and who doesn't love that? It's the ultimate challenge, which I encourage everyone to try at least once as regular Link. A wonderful final boss, but not quite the best in game. Coming in at number 1, we have the Masked Mechanical Got. The fight starts out with Link unfreezing the enemy, which seems counterintuitive, but hey, we've got to get this mask somehow. After that, Got just runs in a circle, so you put on your Goron mask and chase it down. It might seem silly, but this is a lot of fun. You're going as fast as you can, trying to catch this fiend and deal some hefty damage, all whilst dodging its lightning bolt attacks and the debris falling from the ceiling. Got's design is rather interesting. It looks like a mechanical bull with the face of a mature-aged man. It doesn't look perfect, but it's pretty memorable. I'm not too sure where it's running though, or why it just doesn't turn around and charge at you, but we can suspend logic to an extent given how enjoyable this fight is. The sensation of dodging all the obstacles to land a hit is truly rewarding, and it's a great way to incorporate the transformation. The boss room dimensions are a perfect fit for Goron rolling because they aren't too tight like some earlier areas in the dungeon, but there's still that challenge of perfecting movements. It hits that sweet spot of being a fun, challenging and rewarding battle against a good looking enemy in a superb arena. Therefore, Got is well worthy of its title as the best boss in Majora's Mask. So that's it, all 5 bosses ranked from worst to best. Which list did you prefer, mine or the one voted for on Instagram? Be sure to let me know in the comments along with your own ranking. Thanks so much for watching today's video. If you did enjoy it, please give it a like and tell a friend. There's still a lot of Majora's Mask content to come, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss future videos. But for now, stay safe, stay kind, and I'll see you next time on the Hungry Heracross.